The alley was darker than it had any right to be. The city's neon advertisements bled color onto the wet pavement, but somehow the narrow stretch between rusted fire escapes and half-dead vending machines remained untouched, as if even light had decided it wasn't worth the trouble. I was just passing through, carrying a bag of instant noodles and trying to remember if I'd left my kettle plugged in when I heard the sound. A sharp, desperate gasp. Not the kind you make when you stub your toe, the kind that pulls straight at the chest, even if you'd rather mind your own business. Curiosity won, or stupidity, probably both. At the far end, half hidden behind a dumpster, was a small figure. A kid, I thought at first. Hood pulled up, trembling like the city's cold drizzle was more than it could bear. Then the hood slipped and I saw them. Long ears pointed, trembling with fear. Not elf-like, not fairy tale, they were alive, muscles twitching in ways no human ears could move. For half a second, I wondered if I'd accidentally walked into a cosplay convention. But no, there was no mistaking it. This wasn't Earth Standard. I had just enough time to register the shock before three men stepped into the alley from the opposite side. Not the friendly kind. Mismatched jackets, gleaming knives that looked far too sharp for this part of town. The leader sneered, pointing the blade. "Hand it over." "Hand what over?" I blurted before my brain caught up with my mouth. A terrible habit of mine. The kid, the hoodie, or do you just want directions to the nearest knife safety class? They didn't laugh. Tough crowd. The child pressed closer to the dumpster, ears quivering, eyes glowing faintly in the neon spill. The glow wasn't human either, pale silver like liquid mercury. Something primal in me whispered danger, but louder than that was the voice that hated bullies. The leader took a step closer. "Move, or you bleed." It should have been simple. Walk away. Pretend I'd never seen any of this. Let the world go on spinning without me getting stabbed in an alley. But my legs didn't listen. I stepped in front of the kid, dropped my grocery bag, and raised my hands. "Look, if you're that desperate for money, I can give you my noodles, but fair warning, they're spicy. Lethal levels. I've got the ulcers to prove it." That earned me a shove, and then a flash of metal. The first stab came quick, hot fire blooming in my side. My breath hitched, but my mouth kept moving like it didn't know better. "Ow, okay, that's one. I was hoping we could keep it to 0, but sure." The second cut burned across my chest. I staggered but didn't fall. My vision started swimming, the neon bleeding together into a surreal painting. 2. Great. You're a collector, huh? Going for the full set. By the time the third and fourth hit, I could barely stand. Each knife thrust was a lightning bolt, carving away pieces of me. The kid whimpered behind me, and that sound anchored me, kept me upright. I wanted to turn, to tell them it would be okay, but my arms felt like lead. 5, I rasped, coughing up copper. "You know, if you get to 8, you win a toaster. Limited edition. Really worth it." The sixth stab stole my breath completely. My knees buckled. The seventh drove me to the pavement. Cold, wet concrete welcomed me like an old friend. I heard the gang's laughter echoing above, cruel and sharp. The eighth one landed just under my ribs. White-hot final. I collapsed, face first, into the neon-soaked puddle. My cheek pressed to the ground. I saw the reflection of the child's glowing eyes, wide with horror. I wanted to tell them to run, to live, to never let this city chew them up the way it had me, but all that came out was a half-choked laugh. 8. Jackpot. Somebody call the prize committee. Darkness closed in, but it wasn't the usual kind. Not the comforting black of sleep, or even the empty void I expected from death. This was alive. Stars flickered in the distance, constellations shifting like they were watching me. Whispers rippled through the void, voices that weren't voices, syllables strung in patterns my mind barely grasped. Alien but somehow familiar. I floated. My wounds no longer screamed. My body felt light, untethered. I reached for one of the stars, and it pulsed beneath my touch like a heartbeat. The whispers swelled, rising into something almost like music. And for the first time in my life, stabbed 8 times and bleeding out in a filthy alley, I wasn't afraid. I was curious. A final flicker of silver light brushed across my vision, soft as a hand against my cheek. The child, a memory, a promise, I couldn't tell, but it followed me as the stars swallowed everything else. And then nothing. Or maybe everything. I woke up to the smell of fruit. Not the good kind either, the kind that's trying too hard. Sweet, sour, floral, like someone had genetically engineered a mango and a battery to have kids. My eyes flicked open, and instead of the fluorescent ceiling of a hospital ward, I saw the peeling paint of my apartment. I sat up, groaning, bracing for pain, but nothing. No stabs, no blood, no gaping holes where my insides should have been decorating the floor. I glanced down at my chest, tugging my shirt up. Smooth skin, not even scars. I'd have been impressed if I weren't so busy panicking. I should have been dead, 8 times over. Yet here I was in my crappy apartment on my lumpy couch, surrounded by glowing blue fruit piled high on my coffee table. "Oh great," I muttered. Either I survived, or death looked suspiciously like my living room. Something clanked outside the window. I stumbled over, still dizzy from whatever had happened, and froze. They were waiting for me. 3 figures stood in the alley below, but they weren't human. They wore armor that caught the dim streetlight in fractured colors, shifting like oil on water. Weapons hung at their sides, humming low, as if impatient. Their posture was precise, military, no gang thugs this time, and at their head stood a woman. She looked almost human. Almost. Her features were sharp, too symmetrical, the kind of beauty that belonged more to sculpture than biology. But it was her ears that gave her away. Long, graceful, extending past her hair and twitching ever so slightly as if picking up sounds the rest of us missed. Her eyes glowed faintly, like polished amber catching sunlight. She tilted her head, locking onto me with the intensity of someone used to giving orders. I did what any rational man would do. I ducked back behind the curtain and whispered, "Nope." The knock came a second later, not timid, not polite. The kind of knock that says, "We're coming in whether you answer or not." I scrambled for something resembling a weapon. My choices: a half-empty soda can, a broomstick missing its brush, or the noodles I'd dropped last night. I went with the broomstick. If I was going down, I'd go down looking like an angry janitor. The door hissed. Not creaked, not rattled, hissed, like metal locking mechanisms sliding out of place. Which was strange, since my door definitely didn't come with hissing features. Then it swung open, and they filled the doorway. The woman stepped in first, scanning my apartment with a mixture of disdain and curiosity. Her soldiers flanked her, their movements so precise it was like they shared a single mind. She looked at me, and then, in a voice smooth but carrying iron beneath it, she spoke. "You interfered." "That's vague," I said, clutching my broomstick like it meant something. "I interfere with a lot of things: toasters, Wi-Fi connections, dating apps. You'll need to be more specific." Her ears twitched, and I swear her lips twitched too, like she was fighting a smile. She took another step closer. "You placed yourself between the child and her hunters. You bled for her, 8 times. I swallowed. "Yeah, well, I have a bad sense of timing. Your actions have consequences. That's usually how bleeding works." This time, one of the soldiers actually snorted. A quick burst of laughter he tried to cover with a cough. The woman shot him a glance sharp enough to cut steel, and the sound died instantly. She turned back to me. "By the honor code of the Aerolith, you are bound to us. Until your debt is paid, you belong under our protection." I blinked. Bound, protection. "I'm sorry, I think you've mistaken me for someone competent." "You stood," she said simply, "when others would have run." Well, technically, I didn't stand for long. More of a collapse artist, really. 8 stabs will do that. Again, that twitch of her mouth, definitely almost a smile. She gestured toward the table of glowing fruit. "We healed you. The child lives because of you. The Council will know this." "The Council." Her eyes locked onto mine, unblinking. "You are no longer just a human. You are a witness, a protector. And whether you wish it or not, you are part of this war." My broomstick clattered to the floor. "I think you've got the wrong guy. I can't even keep a cactus alive. How am I supposed to survive a war? Silence hung between us. Then softly she said, "Because you already did." I hated how that made my stomach drop, how it made the air feel heavier, charged. She wasn't joking. They weren't leaving. And apparently neither was I. I rubbed my face, groaned, and pointed at the pile of glowing fruit. "Fine, but I'm not eating those. They look like radioactive pears." This time she did smile, just barely, and it was terrifying. I tried to pack like a man preparing for war. But it turns out war doesn't require socks, instant ramen, or a stack of dog-eared comic books from the early 2000s. The soldiers stood in my living room, their glowing armor casting ripples of light across the walls, while I argued with myself over whether 2 pairs of sneakers were excessive. They watched me with the stoicism of statues, though I swore one of them muttered something when I held up my electric kettle like it was a priceless artifact. The tall woman, the one with the long ears that twitched like satellite dishes trying to catch an elusive frequency, stood near the door, arms folded, expression carved from stone. She hadn't said much since dropping the "you're bound to us forever" bomb last night. Just stood there, waiting, watching. Every now and then I caught her eyes following me, that faint amber glow, unsettling and strangely reassuring at the same time. "Look," I said, holding up a pack of instant noodles like a peace offering. "This is critical survival gear. Lightweight, portable, cooks in 3 minutes. Unless your space army has its own line of gourmet snacks." She blinked once. "Our rations sustain warriors for 40 days. 40 days. I tore open the packet and wiggled the brick of dry noodles at her. "These sustain me for 40 minutes, maybe less if I forget the seasoning." The soldier closest to me actually chuckled. His commander's ear twitched sharply in his direction, and he snapped back to silence. I was beginning to suspect laughter was against regulations. Poor guy. When I finally zipped up my bag, stuffed with ramen, socks, and my entire sense of denial, the woman gestured to the window. "We depart." Through the window. Yes. I peeked out. My apartment was on the 5th floor. We have these things called stairs. Revolutionary concept. You should try them." She gave no response, only tapped a small device on her wrist. The air outside shimmered, and suddenly a sleek vessel decloaked, hovering in the alley with silent menace. Sleek lines, glowing hull, sharp edges like a predator frozen mid-pounce. My jaw dropped. "Oh," I said faintly, "that's better than stairs." The ride-up wasn't as terrifying as I expected, more like being pulled into a bubble of gravity that ignored the laws of physics. My stomach wobbled, my ears popped, but somehow I didn't scream. Much. By the time we stepped onto the vessel, I was already forgetting about socks and ramen. The interior was like stepping into another reality. Curving corridors pulsed faintly with light, like veins carrying energy instead of blood. Doors slid open with whispers, revealing glimpses of rooms filled with crystalline screens, alien script floating across them. The air smelled faintly metallic, like ozone before a storm. The child I'd nearly died for sat in one of the chambers, perched on a floating chair that adjusted to her every twitch. Her ears drooped when she saw me, then perked up slightly. She whispered something in her own tongue, a string of syllables that rippled like water. "She says thank you," the woman translated. "Tell her she's welcome," I said, crouching awkwardly. Then, because my brain hates silence, I added, "But let's not make this a habit. My stab punch card is already full." The kid giggled, a high, ringing sound that felt like sunlight in a room made of steel. Even the soldiers softened at the sound. For a moment, the whole place felt less alien. Later, when they showed me to a cabin, small, Spartan, glowing walls humming faintly with some kind of tech, I collapsed onto the bed and tried to make sense of it all. Yesterday, I was just a guy worried about whether my kettle would short-circuit. Today, I was apparently some kind of honorary member of an alien honor code, hitching a ride with a group of interstellar soldiers who looked at me like I'd sprouted antennae. I stared at the ceiling. "Bound to them," I muttered. "Great, I can barely commit to a phone plan." The ship shifted, and the stars outside my window blurred as we left Earth's orbit. My stomach flipped. I was leaving everything behind. My job, my couch, the convenience store at the corner that never judged me for buying midnight snacks. In their place, a glowing-eyed kid, a commander who looked like she'd rather strangle me than smile, and an army of soldiers who treated me like some weird cross between a hero and a liability. The door slid open without warning. The commander stepped inside. I sat up too fast and smacked my head against the glowing wall. Ow, perfect timing. I was just practicing headbutts. Her amber gaze flicked to me, then to the duffel bag of ramen I dumped on the floor. She picked one up, turned it over, studied the block of dehydrated noodles like it was alien tech. Which, I guess, it was to her. "What is its function?" she asked. "Life support," I said solemnly. "Also heartburn, sometimes both at once." Her ears twitched, and I could have sworn her lips curved upward just slightly. She placed the ramen back into the bag and straightened. "Rest. Tomorrow you will face the council. They will decide your place among us." "Council," I echoed. "Like Space Parliament, do I need a tie?" Her silence was the kind that said she either didn't understand the joke or was choosing to ignore it. Probably both. She turned and left, the door sealing behind her. Alone again, I lay back on the bed, staring at the stars streaking past. I was terrified, exhausted, and absurdly aware that somewhere in the galaxy, people were already writing my name into things I didn't understand. And still I couldn't help whispering into the quiet, "Please let the council have snacks, preferably not glowing fruit." The corridors of the ship had a rhythm, like the heartbeat of some massive creature gliding through the void. I followed the soldiers down a twisting passage, trying not to trip over the shifting panels that hummed faintly under my feet. Every step felt like stepping into a world that had rules I didn't know, and I suspected that was exactly the point. The alien child floated ahead, tethered to nothing but a faint glow that pulsed with her breathing. I wanted to call out to say, "Hey, slow down, Earth gravity isn't optional." But the commander's glare froze the words in my throat. I bit back a joke about her ears acting like built-in radar. The humor died as quickly as it appeared. We arrived at the observation deck. The crystalline city suspended in the void shimmered as we entered the council chambers. I had expected grandeur, but nothing prepared me for this. Towers of translucent crystal spiraled upward, their surfaces etched with symbols that pulsed with light like veins of energy. The floor shifted beneath my feet, tiny platforms rearranging themselves as if anticipating each movement. I stumbled once, narrowly catching myself on a railing that wasn't even solid. Already the city was making me look foolish. The soldiers flanked me, silent, their presence both comforting and intimidating. The child floated beside me, ears twitching with curiosity and excitement. I tried to keep my composure. Tried. But I had been up since Earth hours ago, survived 8 stab wounds, traveled through space on a vessel that ignored gravity, and now I was about to meet the most powerful figures in this alien civilization. My hands shook as I wiped non-existent sweat from my palms. The council members emerged. They were enormous, even by my poor human standards. Each one seemed partially formed of energy, their bodies flickering between solid and liquid states. Faces unreadable, voices like harmonies of wind and metal. One of them leaned forward, its attention snapping toward me, and I immediately wished I had brought a tie, or at least a clean shirt. "You are the human who saved the child," it intoned. The voice wrapped around my mind, resonating in ways I couldn't identify. 8 wounds, 8 proofs of courage, and yet you survive. I coughed awkwardly, trying to sound casual. "Well, you know, Earth medicine is surprisingly good, and apparently a little alien magic." There was a pause, so long I thought I'd offended them irrevocably. Then a ripple of faint amusement passed through the council. Maybe. Hard to tell with beings who sometimes blinked out of existence mid-sentence. "You will understand," another member said, its form stretching toward the ceiling and then shrinking again. that your actions are not without consequence. The child is of great importance. Her lineage holds sway over countless systems. To protect her is to assume a role larger than you can comprehend. I swallowed, so I'm suddenly important. I didn't even get a medal. The council did not respond, not verbally anyway. I caught the child whispering something under her breath, and the commander translated. He says you're underestimating your significance, but he doesn't know sarcasm yet. I gave her a faint thumbs up. She didn't return it. I didn't hold it against her. We were led to a chamber that overlooked the city's core. Pools of liquid light swirled below, feeding structures that twisted impossibly upward. Here, the council revealed the stakes. Factions within their civilization were plotting to provoke war across multiple star systems. The child's life was at the center of their plans. Taken, she would become a symbol, a catalyst for destruction. I blinked trying to digest this. So, kidnap her, start a war, call it interstellar politics. Got it. Wait, do I get a handbook for this? One of the soldiers glanced at me, eyebrow raised. The commander's ears twitched sharply, and I realized my humor was probably tolerated only because it provided comic relief amidst existential doom. Excellent. A role I could actually fill. We watched holographic projections of the pursuers, sleek, shadowy ships that moved like liquid through the void. Some bore energy weapons capable of flattening planets. Others carried stealth technology beyond Earth's imagination. They were organized, ruthless, and terrifying, and they were coming for the child. I rubbed my temple. So basically, I'm a babysitter with a death wish. Great. Love this job already. The commander's amber eyes softened slightly. You are more than a human. Your actions are unpredictable yet effective. That is why you are here. That is why you survive. I swallowed again. Unpredictable. I'm terrified that's code for liable to cause accidents. Perhaps, she said. Perhaps, but your unpredictability inspires hope in ways we cannot achieve. Hope, I could almost believe it, standing there, staring at the holographic chaos that threatened the galaxy. Somehow my bad jokes, clumsy timing, and sheer stubbornness mattered. Somehow they had turned me from an ordinary man into a pivot in a cosmic struggle I had never signed up for. Later, in the quiet of the observation deck, the child floated near me, tugging gently at my sleeve. I bent down, trying not to topple over in zero gravity, and she whispered her thanks. Not in words I understood, but I felt it. Gratitude, trust, and a hint of mischief. I laughed softly. Trust me, kid. If we survive this, I'll consider it a personal victory. The commander appeared beside me, silent as a shadow. Her gaze swept over the city, then settled on me. Tomorrow you will undergo preparation. The council expects you to understand their ways, to participate fully, and you will. I participate, I said, grinning despite the tension. Mostly by surviving, and maybe cracking jokes when things get too deadly. Her ears twitched. Again, almost like a smile. I couldn't tell if she found me amusing or if she was plotting my immediate death. With her, it was always a gamble. As the stars swirled outside, the city thrummed beneath us, and the child's glowing eyes followed every movement. I realized that despite my fear, despite my utter lack of preparation, I was exactly where I needed to be. Somehow the galaxy had chosen me, flawed and ridiculous as I was, to stand between catastrophe and survival. I whispered to no one, "All right, universe. Let's see what we're made of, preferably without any more stabbing." Somewhere deep in the heart of the crystalline city, I thought I heard laughter. And maybe, just maybe, it was mine. The alarms didn't ring. They screamed. Red light spilled into every corner of the ship, bouncing off polished metal and crystal surfaces, turning corridors into rivers of molten urgency. I bolted upright from the observation deck, almost losing my balance in the low gravity, and grabbed the nearest railing for support. My stomach churned violently, my brain doing acrobatics to catch up with the warning signals flashing everywhere. The commander was already moving, her long ears pressed back in concentration, soldiers fanning out around her like a living constellation. "They've breached the outer perimeter," she said, voice clipped and calm, though I swear her pupils narrowed. "Prepare for engagement." I froze, my hand hovered over a strange weapon that hummed faintly. "Engagement," I echoed. "Like board games, because if it's board games, I'm already losing." One of the soldiers gave a snort, brief, sharp, quickly stifled. I wasn't sure if it was amusement or exasperation. I settled on both. The commander's amber eyes flicked to me. "You fight, you survive, improvise." Improvise. I could barely pour cereal without setting off a small disaster, and now I was expected to fight. Across space. Against beings who could probably turn my body into a hologram and laugh about it before breakfast. The first wave hit the city. Shadows, moving faster than thought, slicing through the protective energy barriers with liquid precision. Ships that weren't ships in any human sense. They were kinetic predators, shifting, folding into themselves, striking like lightning. I panicked, I think I screamed, definitely shouted something incomprehensible. Then the commander grabbed my shoulder. "Focus." I blinked, nodded, and tried to focus. The child floated nearby, her glowing eyes wide, tracking the attackers as though she were reading a story. Somehow I drew courage from that tiny figure. If she could face this without flinching, so could I, or at least so I hoped. I raised the weapon and pointed. A wave of energy pulsed from it, and the nearest drone skidded to the side, spinning uncontrollably. My heart leapt. I had done something useful, see. I shouted, puffing up with pride. "Told you I had skills." The commander's ears twitched sharply. I swear she almost smiled. Or she was silently plotting my demise. Again, impossible to tell. The fight escalated. Drones, ships, all shifting and attacking in patterns too fast for my human brain to fully comprehend. Soldiers moved like shadows, sleek, precise, lethal. And me. I flailed, accidentally activating panels, sending energy pulses in unexpected directions. Somehow, every time I panicked, chaos followed, but chaos that strangely worked in our favor. Drones collided, attacks misfired, and the child's pursuers were momentarily distracted by my ineptitude. "Unpredictable," the commander muttered, almost to herself. "Effective." I blinked. "Effective, you mean lucky." The city itself seemed to respond, corridors shifting, barriers reforming, lights flickering like nerves. I stumbled through the streets suspended in zero gravity, dodging blasts that singed the air around me, and I started to notice something. When I moved with intention, no matter how clumsy, I created openings for the soldiers, traps for the enemy, a strange rhythm of disaster and salvation. At one point, I almost collided with the child, who looked at me with that curious glow. "I've got this," she whispered in her tongue, ears twitching sharply. The commander translated. "She says your chaos is helping her." Helping her? I almost fell into the energy conduit 3 times. I protested. "You have," she said. "And yet you are still standing. That is why you matter." By the time the last of the attackers was repelled, the city was scarred. Lights flickering weakly, structures humming as they stabilized. My legs shook uncontrollably, my chest burned, and my mind refused to process everything that had just happened. The commander approached me, her armor humming faintly as she moved. "You survived," she said simply. "That is all that matters." I leaned heavily on my weapon, trying to catch my breath. "Survived? Yeah, barely. I think my hair turned white, and possibly my eyebrows, but surviving is good. We're still alive, right?" "Yes." She glanced at the child, who floated closer and reached a tiny hand toward me. I caught it awkwardly, like holding an exotic instrument. The warmth of her glow spread through me, and for a moment all the chaos seemed distant. I laughed softly, exhaustion and disbelief tangled together. "You know, if anyone had told me yesterday that I'd be here, fighting aliens and somehow making a difference, I'd have asked if they were hallucinating." Her amber eyes flicked toward mine and her ears twitched again. "You are not hallucinating. You are part of this now, and your part is essential." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words settle in my chest. Essential. Somehow my mistakes, my flailing, my improbable survival had all mattered. The child floated close, resting her small hand against my arm, eyes glowing faintly in trust and gratitude. I muttered more to myself than anyone else. All right, universe, I'm still alive. I made it. But seriously, can we try this without nearly dying next time? Somewhere deep in the vessel, a soldier snorted quietly. The commander's ears twitched. I had the faintest sense she was amused. And I realized then that in a galaxy filled with lethal precision, wars, and unimaginable dangers, I had become useful. Or at least unpredictably so. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The final assault came without warning, though I suppose in a war spanning star systems, without warning is relative. The enemy moved like liquid shadows, streaking through the void toward Earth's sector, intent on turning an entire planet into a message. The vessel rocked as we engaged them, energy shields flaring, weapons humming with lethal precision. I was tense, every fiber screaming, yet oddly calm, as though surviving 8 stabs and navigating alien politics had somehow prepared me for this very moment. The commander barked orders, soldiers flowing like coordinated currents around me. And me? I held my weapon with purpose, no longer fumbling, no longer panicking at every pulse of energy. Somehow, over the course of weeks that had felt like years, I had learned, adapted. I was still clumsy, still making sarcastic quips under fire, but I had grown into the role of protector. The child's life, and now the fate of entire systems, rested on our shoulders, and I carried that weight with the strange mixture of fear and pride that comes with real responsibility. The enemy's lead vessel tore through the first barrier, energy blasts sparking across the city suspended in our ship. I lunged forward, activating a control panel almost instinctively, sending a wave of destabilizing pulses toward the attackers. They wavered, their ship spinning, giving the soldiers openings to strike. I almost stumbled backward, but a small hand, the child's, clutched mine. Her glow steadied me, and I realized then that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was moving forward despite it. As the battle intensified, I found myself paired with the commander, moving through corridors in zero gravity, dodging energy bursts, guiding soldiers, and improvising strategies in real time. My jokes had become a form of morale, breathing